together to welcome Max.
Hi everybody. My name is Max Harrington. I'm a Vice Consul at the US Consulate in Toronto, and I've been here in Toronto for a year and a half now. It's my first assignment in the Foreign Service. I've done over 20,000 visas in a year and a half. I do about 100 interviews a day, on average about 3 minutes per interview. So been through a lot since I got here. Really have enjoyed staying in Toronto, and it's my first time to Centennial presenting, but I've done some of these sessions before. So I'm going to try and spend about 30 minutes on the actual presentation today, no more than that, and then we'll leave at least 30 minutes for questions, and then we'll try and end. It's 1 o'clock, so we'll try and end in 2. In case anyone needs to leave. If you need to go early, feel free just to get up and go to class or whatever. And you can ask me questions individually up here on the stage, after the presentation. So if you can't hear me at any point, just kind of raise your hand and let me know that you can't hear me, okay? All right, so it's great to have you all here. This is a big crowd. This is exciting. So the presentation, it's basically on the US visa process, how you apply, what kinds of visas we have, recommendations for you to get a visa. If I can just ask before we start, how many of you are international students here? Raise your hands. Any Canadians in the audience? But are you guys here for the presentation, or you're just studying? Studying, okay. Are any Canadians here for the presentation? No, okay, all international students. Who's from India? Who's from China? Iran? No. Philippines? Jamaica? Yeah. What other countries are here? Huh? Nigeria, okay. Venezuela, where else? Sri Lanka? Hong Kong? Okay. Spain. Oh, cool. All right. Next. Okay, so a visa, guys, visa is basically a way that allows you to get on a flight, go to the US, or get to the border and apply for entry. Once you actually get to the border or an airport entering the United States, you'll be interviewed again by a US Customs and Border Protection or CBP officer. So just because you have a visa doesn't guarantee you access to the United States. It's basically just a permit to apply for entry to the United States. So that's kind of a common misperception I just wanted to be clear about. Okay, so Department of State, that's my office, the US Consulate here. We're located all around the world. We have an embassy in Ottawa. Here in Toronto, it's called a consulate because it's not where the ambassador sits. It's not the national capital, right? Even though our consulate here in Toronto is pretty big because Toronto is a big city, of course. And then the Bureau of Customs and Border Protection, that's CBP. Those are the officers that are at the border or at the pre-clearance at Toronto Airport. You go through the interview with them when you're entering the United States. Okay, so if you're applying for most visas, there's a basic thing that you have to prove in order to get the visa. And that is that we as consular officers are actually required by law to assume that everyone who applies for a visa intends to immigrate to the United States. So I know that sounds kind of harsh, but that's what the U.S. immigration law says. So it's kind of it's a high hurdle, right? Your job is to convince us in the interview that you're not intending to immigrate to the United States, that you're only going for vacation, or you're only going to study, you're only going for an exchange program, something like that, and that you intend to leave the United States and then go back to Canada, obviously, or your home country after your stay is finished there. So that's section 214B. The most common refusal that you see in visas is under section 214B, and that is basically that that you were not able to convince an officer that you don't intend to immigrate to the United States. So that's kind of the main thing that most of our applicants need to prove to us. All right, so there's a lot of different visas. I kind of call it an alphabet soup, right? If you're traveling to attend a job interview, going to a business meeting, a workshop, visiting relatives, sightseeing, shopping in Buffalo, Disney in Florida, whatever it is, that's called a B1, B2 visa. The reason why it's B1, B2 is B1 is visitor for business, B2 is visitor for pleasure, visitor for tourism, for vacation, whatever. And we oftentimes put those two together, so if you get a B1, B2 visa, it means that you can go for business, go for pleasure, all of those things. If you're studying in the United States for a degree program, you get an F1 or student visa. If you're going for an internship or participating in a summer work program, you would apply for a J1 visa. Okay? So those are probably the visas that most of you will be applying for. Then there are what we call petition-based visas, and that's where a U.S. employer, for example, for H-1B visa, how many of you have heard of H-1B visa? This is one of the most common work visas in the United States if you want to work there. It's where an employer in the United States submits an application basically on your behalf for you to work for that employer in the United States. And that employer has to do that before you actually apply for the visa or go to the United States. You can do that from here in Canada, assuming you find a job, you find an employer that can submit the petition for you. You can do that here. But what a lot of people do is they go as students, F1 visa. Then once they graduate, they have what's called a year of optional practical training, or OPT. It's basically like getting a work permit here in Canada. You can work in a job in the field that you studied in for a year, and then if the employer likes you and they want to keep you, many of those employers will try and petition for an H-1B visa to allow you to stay and work in the United States. Okay, we'll skip that next part. Next. By the way, I think this presentation, I know I'm kind of going fast, is going to be available or posted somewhere. Yeah. Posted on YouTube, in case you want to see the text later. Okay, so there's a fee. The fees are paid before the interview. They are non-refundable, whether you're issued or denied, so you can't get it back, unfortunately. But for a standard B1, B2 visitor visa, it's $160. That's the same for student visa F, for Canadian citizens, TN, visas to work in the United States, Canadian or Mexican citizens. I don't know if there are any Mexicans here today. 160. For some of the other categories, it's a little bit higher. Next. Okay, and for some countries, there are reciprocity fees. And that's where if your home country, for example, Congo, any Congolese here? No? If Congo charges U.S. citizens more than $160 to apply for a visa to that country, then the U.S. in exchange, as reciprocity, right, will charge a similar amount. So if you're from one of those countries where you have to pay an extra fee, you pay that after the interview. And you only pay it assuming your interview is successful. So the $160 fee is before the interview, non-refundable. And then these reciprocity fees for some nationalities, mostly not Indians or Chinese, so you guys don't have to worry about it, are paid after the interview. Next. Okay, we have a new policy here in Toronto. We call it the Personal Appearance Waiver, and there's a set of requirements for it. It's where you don't have to come for an actual interview at the consulate to get a visa. And the requirements are this. If you filed a previous visa and you're applying for the same visa classification, you had a B1, B2 before, you want the same thing again. The visa has expired less than 12 months ago, and you still have it, In other words, you haven't lost it, right? You reside in Canada, and you hold a valid legal permanent resident or landed immigrant status, or a valid study or work permit. Okay, you can't be a visitor in Canada and do this. To learn more, there's a link there. Okay, next. Okay, for children or grandparents, and for some of you, how many of you are landed immigrants here? Landed immigrants, permanent residents? No? Okay. So for children under the age of 14 or over the age of 79, so in other words 80 or older, if you reside in Canada, you have permanent resident status or valid study or work permit. For children under the age of 14, with one parent, at least one parent holding a valid visa or being a Canadian citizen, those people also don't have to come for interview. So if you guys have friends who are landed immigrants here, for example, and they have their parents, who might reside half the time in China or something, or in India, and are coming here and have permanent resident status themselves, then they don't have to come for the interview if they're 80 or older. Thanks. Okay, nationals of Cuba, Iran, Syria, and Sudan are not eligible for this, unfortunately. If you've had a visa previously annotated as clearance received or waiver of ineligibility, if you've answered yes to any of the security questions, that's things like, have you ever been a member of a terrorist group, or have you ever committed a crime, or whatever. If you previously if you've had a visa refused before and not been issued, then you don't qualify for this. Next. Okay, it also applies in other countries as well. So if your parents are back in India and they're 80 or older, they might not need to go for an interview in India. Next. Okay, while we're talking about your parents, how many of you have had your parents come to visit? Here, a few. Do your parents have U.S. visas? Any of you? Yeah. Any of you interested in maybe applying for visas for your parents if they come and visit? Maybe. Okay. Our recommendation to you guys, and please tell all your friends as well, if your parents are coming here and they only have visitor status here, in other words, they're not permanent residents, they're not in work or study permits, we recommend that they apply in their home countries. Visiting from China, please apply in China before you come to Canada. Because if they're visitors here, it can be harder for them to get a visa in Canada than it would be if they were applying in their home countries, okay? Doesn't mean it's impossible, and we do issue, visiting parents and grandparents sometimes, but that's our recommendation to make it easier for you guys. Next. Okay, visa waiver program. We have someone from Spain, right? Spain? But are you here for the presentation? Okay, cool. Have you been to the US before? No? Okay. So citizens of Spain and some other countries are eligible for this visa waiver program. But since it doesn't apply to most of you, I don't think I'll go into it too deeply. The important thing for the visa waiver program is, except for Canadian citizens, so Canadian citizens are kind of in a whole special class on their own. Under the visa waiver program, you can only go and stay in the U.S. up to 3 months at a time. If you're a citizen of one of these countries and you want to stay in the U.S. more than 3 months as a visitor, for example, you have to apply for a visa, a B1, B2 visa. And just because you're a citizen of one of these countries doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for a visa. You still can, of course, if you want. Next. Okay, skip that. Next. Okay, academic study. How many of you might be interested in studying in the United States? Okay. Okay, a whole group over here, huh? So most of you will probably be looking at the F1 visa, that student visa. The way this works is a school will issue a signed I-20. It's a form to you, and then you should bring that to the interview with you, of course. You must register in what we call the SEVIS, or Student and Exchange Visitor Information System database, and present proof at the interview that you've paid the SEVIS fee. There's a website there. Also, students, like I said, you must overcome this 214B, which is basically you have to prove that when you finish your studies that you don't intend to immigrate to the United States, okay? You can't show up to the interview and say, when I graduate in 4 years, I'm going to immigrate, get a green card, become a US citizen. Don't say that at the interview, okay? You need to prove to us that you intend to leave the United States. Next. Okay, J1 visas for exchange programs, including internship or training programs. The sponsor institution or the third party issues a DS 2019 and DS 7002. Okay, the 2019 is the form that you bring to the interview with you. Again, there's SEVIS, and again, there's 214B. Next. Okay, how many of you might be interested in doing like an internship in the United States as sort of a study as, you know, 1 semester thing? Okay. So for citizens of especially India and China and other countries as well, if your home government has decided, for example, you're an Indian, and the Indian government has decided that the field that you're going to do the internship in is important enough to the national interest of India, and that they don't want their citizens who are getting trained in these specific areas to then leave the countries permanently, your home governments might require, through our government, that before you work in the United States, for example with an H-1B visa, after an internship that's in a specific field, that you go back to India, or if you're a permanent resident here, sorry, not for permanent residents here, that you go back to India or China, for example, and live there for 2 years before you can then get a work visa in the United States. There's a website for that, and I'm happy to show anyone later how that works, okay? Next. Okay, H-1B, this is temporary employment for up to 6 years in a specialty occupation requiring theoretical or practical application of highly specialized knowledge. Okay, I know that sounds really high, but I see a lot of H-1Bs that don't really seem that specialized. Extensions are possible. It requires a completion of at least a bachelor's degree in a specialty or equivalent experience. Okay. There are annual numerical caps for the number of visas. The key thing about H-1B is it is a pathway to immigration to the United States. And it's basically one of the only main pathways to immigration, other than, for example, like through marriage, or, you know, coming in as a refugee and then getting a green card, for example. So 214B doesn't apply, because most people who work in the United States on H-1B visas are trying to get a green card, are trying to immigrate. And so that's normal, that's well understood. So this is the one visa where you do not have to prove to us that you don't intend to immigrate to the United States. And it's like I said, a lot of students who study in the US on F1 first, then they get H-1B if they decide to stay. It's kind of like in Canada, you know, after you study here, you can get an open work permit. If you work for a certain amount of time in the field you studied, I think, then you can apply for landed immigrant status. So the H-1B is sort of the American equivalent of that. Next, please. Yeah. Okay. For the folks online, we'll do questions at the end. So I don't know if you can see me.
That's good.
All right. So it's the employer's responsibility to complete the petition process for H-1B. They file the petition, they do all these forms, usually it's the lawyers that do everything. Then you get an I-797 approval form, and that's when you come for the interview. And basically the interview is us just checking to make sure that you did not submit a fraudulent degree, that you did not lie to your employer about your qualifications or your experience. So we're just checking to make sure that everything is right, basically. Next. Okay, Canadian citizens and Mexican citizens. The TN visa, it's a great deal. This is through the NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. So American citizens can also come up to Canada and work in a similar category up here. You must work in a designated professional occupation. I think we have some handouts, maybe at the front table there, or it's on. Specific degree requirements apply, depending on the occupation. You must have a job offer letter, proof of qualifications, and Canadian citizens, I know this says must apply directly at the port of entry without first obtaining a visa. Most do apply at the port of entry, but you actually can apply for the visa at the consulate first if you want. You don't have to go to the port of entry. So for example, if your job or your qualifications are sort of in a gray area and you're not sure whether you're going to be approved, or you don't want to go all the way to the border with all your stuff and move out of your apartment right before you take the job, come to us and try with us first. So you can do it either way. Is anyone here, international students, are you married to Canadian citizens? Anyone married to a Canadian? No? Okay. If you're married to a Canadian, you can get you can get a TD visa, which is a dependent of your Canadian citizen spouse. But TD visa holders cannot, for example, if you're not a Canadian citizen, but your spouse is, your spouse can go to the border and apply directly. You have to come to the consulate and apply for a visa first. Okay? Next. Okay, yeah, here we go. Dependents. So dependents are children under the age of 21 and spouses. You must show legal proof of relationship, like marriage permit, marriage license, sorry. Your principal applicant, so the person actually doing the job or in school, must be in status. It must have the valid visa or status. Okay, I think we'll skip the rest of that. Next. Okay, visa application process. This is what you guys are waiting for. You gain admission or get hired. You get the right paperwork. Then you complete the online application form, otherwise known as the DS-160, at that website. And again, you don't have to scribble it down. The link is on our consulate website. You pay the application fee, then you make an appointment. So things for appointments to keep in mind. In Toronto, our busy season for visas is in the summer. Basically, that's any time between June and August. Our wait times during the summer for interviews are oftentimes more than 2 weeks, even sometimes as much as 3 weeks. Whereas right now, our wait time is, I think, a week or less for interview. So my recommendation to you is don't wait till the summer to apply, because it could be a while before you get an appointment, and don't want you to miss your trips, right? Also, just to keep in mind, other consulates in Canada, like Montreal or the embassy in Ottawa, they're only about 4 hours away, right? And they usually have much shorter wait times than we do because we just have so many applicants here in Toronto. So you can also go and apply in Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa if you want. Okay, so you prepare for the interview, you gather required items, the DS-160 confirmation page. You want to bring a photo that meets the requirements. Otherwise, you might show up and then we might send you out to get a new photo. You don't want that to happen. Possible reciprocity fee. Make sure your passport is valid for at least 6 months beyond the date of your travel. Okay? Not from the date of the interview, but from the date that you intend to enter the United States. The supporting documentation, and then attend your visa interview at the consulate next. Okay, if you're a graduate student, for example, if you're doing a postgrad diploma, if you're a master's or PhD student in science, technology, engineering, or math fields, please bring a CV or resume and a list of your scientific publications, and also be prepared to discuss your specific itinerary to the US, i.e. when you want to enter, where you're going to stay, is anyone traveling with you, are you meeting anyone there, are you going to a specific conference, things like that, okay? Next. Okay, the online application is there. It must be completed online, and you must bring the barcode confirmation page with you to the interview. Make sure your printer doesn't cut off the barcode, please. That happens a lot. Next. As I mentioned, appointments fill several weeks in advance sometimes. Most visas can be processed within 1 week of the interview, but some require additional administrative processing. That can take anywhere from a couple of weeks to months. It really depends on the specific case and the specific issue. Most of the time, we won't be able to tell you, unfortunately, what the issue is. You'll just have to kind of wait to hear from us. So that's why if you're engineering or science student, please bring a CV or resume with you to the interview because that helps speed the process. Okay. All right, key points. 214B is the assumption of immigrant intent. Make sure you provide accurate and complete information on your application form. I cannot stress this enough, if you hire someone, if you pay someone to fill out the application for you, make sure they do it properly. Because I see a lot of applicants that have paid someone to fill out their forms and the information is wrong. I'm sure all of you, if you're studying here, can speak English really well, so I'm sure that you can probably fill out the forms yourself. So it's not that hard. My recommendation is that you do it yourself. Don't hire someone to do it. If you need help understanding some words or terminology, ask a friend to help you do it, to sit down with you and do it. Also, very, very key points on the application. If you have family in the United States, family or relatives, make sure you tell us. Okay, there's a question, do you have any relatives in the United States? A lot of people put no, even though they have relatives in the United States. So please answer that correctly. If you've applied for a visa and refused, please answer that correctly. If a family member in the United States has filed an immigrant petition on your behalf, like an aunt or uncle, for example, 10 years ago, filed for your mom or dad, and you as a child, as a dependent child, right, to immigrate to the U.S. Even if that application has been canceled, even if it was 20 years ago, please tell us on the application there's a question for that. Because if you don't answer a question like that correctly, then it makes us think that, oh, are you lying? Are you trying to hide something? And most people are honest. Most people don't try to hide stuff. They just make some mistakes, and we can understand that sometimes. But it will really help your application if you answer everything properly. Okay, paperwork. Apply early. Oh, yeah, don't make travel plans until you have a visa. Please don't buy plane tickets or make non-refundable hotel reservations. I can't tell you how many people come to the interview, they have a flight 2 days from now that they've already paid for. And when I tell them, well, you can't have the visa in 2 days, it takes a week, then they miss their flight. So don't make reservations that you can't get refunds for before you have the visa in your hand, okay? Next. Okay, we have a call center, phone numbers there. There's our Canada US Visa-info.com. That's where you make the appointment, and that has information in it to fill out the application. Next. And more resources are our consulate website, toronto.usconsulate.gov. MC, some other stuff. USCIS, by the way, is US Citizenship and Immigration Services. They're the agency that if you have an employer in the US petitioning for an H-1B for you, USCIS takes the approval for that and then approves the documents. Okay. Let me just check what time it is. 1:35. Okay, good. So I know the guys on the Hangout have questions. Let's maybe 5 questions in the audience first. Okay, and then maybe I'll take a couple from the Hangout section. Okay, so raise your hand if you have one. Yeah, speak loudly if you will. Oh, we have a microphone. Okay.
I want to apply for YouTube. You just visit and just roam around your country. So I want to apply by the end of my this semester as I'm getting a 4 months break. So is that good? I'm able to do that?
So you're able to apply. Can the people on the hand hear the question?
Maybe repeat that.
Okay, I'll repeat it just in case of the hands. The question was, I'm finishing a semester and I want to travel in the summer. Should I wait until after the semester finishes to apply? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, would that be any chances that I can't get it? Would there be
any chance that you can't get a visa?
Yeah. What are the possibilities?
What are the possibilities? Well, I can't say, without seeing your application in front of me, what are the possibilities. But here are a couple tips that might help you. Okay. For all of you students here, probably all no permanent residents, right? So you're probably all on study permit in Canada. For applicants on study permit, your main sort of tie to Canada is your student status. So one of the things that we do look at sometimes is, are you doing well in school? Okay. Are you doing well enough that you're not going to be on academic probation, that you're going to continue into the next semester, that you get good grades so that when you graduate you find a job, right? Because employers won't hire you if you have bad grades, right? So sometimes we do ask to see transcripts. I would encourage all of you to bring your transcripts to the interview. Please bring an original one if possible, not just like a printout from the website. And for that reason, I would recommend waiting until you finish at least 1 semester in Canada before you apply for a visa, so that you can show how you did in your first semester. Now, there's nothing that's stopping you from applying for a visa a day after you arrive in Canada. If you're still in your first semester, of course you can apply. But just from personal experience, it can be harder to qualify, if you've only been here a month or 2 and you haven't finished a semester yet. Okay? Yep. Next. Over there? Oh, sorry. Yes.
I'm a student advisor here at the college, and so I get these questions every day. My question to you is, when the students go to do their interview and they've done the application, a lot of them are getting denied because the question to them is, where are you going? So a lot of them want to go to Buffalo to shop, but they don't know the hotels from that. So what's happening is they're being denied because they don't know where they're going to be staying in the United States. So what do you, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So what do you
that's not a, yeah, that's not a sign, is it? Does this mean I should run away?
So what would be their suggestion? They go into the interview and, the person asks them where you're going. 9 times out of 10 they'll say, well, I like to go to Buffalo shop.
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, where are you staying? And they don't know, and then they get denied because they don't know what their plans are. So then they come back to see me, and I'm thinking, well, so what should we do?
Okay. So the question was, a lot of students are going just to Buffalo to shop. When they show up at the interview, they're asked, well, where are you staying? Where are you going specifically? And then if they don't know, they get denied. So it's a fair question. If you haven't been to the United States before, how can you be expected to know exactly, what shop you're going to or what hotel you're staying at, right? So my advice is just be prepared to be honest. So if I had an applicant that said, I'm I'm going to Buffalo to shop, or I'm going to stay overnight for a long weekend. And I asked, oh, well, where are you going to stay? If they say, I don't know, and if that's all they say, maybe that's not good enough. But if they say, I don't know, but, I'm not going for another month, and my friends and I are going to talk about where to stay, we're going to look online, or I'll ask a friend who's been to Buffalo before. That to me makes perfect sense, and I would not hold that against an applicant. So I think maybe it's where applicants just say, I don't know, and then that's the end of the answer or the conversation. That's when, so I think people just need to be realistic. And it's okay if you don't know what hotel you're going to stay in. Okay. Next question.
My question is, I applied my February and I came to Canada December.
Yeah.
How as an application? My question is, you need to put the information online to let us know as students how long we need to stay in Canada before we apply, and if you're refused, how long will you stay before we apply again?
Okay, so the question is, our website should have information about how long you should stay in Canada before you apply. And then if you're refused, how long you should wait before the next interview. Well, unfortunately, we can't really put that on the website because there's no rule. Like I said, you can apply a day after you arrive in Canada. You can be a visitor to Canada and not know a single person in Toronto and apply the second day that you're here. You can. You're probably not going to get a visa, right, unless you have a really good explanation about what you're doing here. But there is no rule for when you can apply. All I'm giving you is my own recommendation from personal experience, interviewing a lot of applicants and then seeing the other officers. And that's why I say I recommend, as a student, if you're not a landed immigrant here as a student, I'd wait at least a semester to apply. Now, if you've been refused, you can apply again anytime. In a next interview, a different officer will interview you. So it won't be the same, mean officer that interviewed you the first time. And you can apply as many times as you want. You'll get a different officer each time. Even if the consular chief has to come down from his office and interview you, he'll come down. But if you've been refused, my recommendation is that you wait some time until you can show something new the next time you come for interview. So if you've been refused, maybe wait another semester so that you can show another semester's worth of work. But because that's only a recommendation, it's not really something we can put on our website. Because what we don't want applicants to think is, oh, I have to wait a semester, or I have to wait 6 months before I apply again, because that's not true. But it's a good point. Thank you. So 2 more questions, then we'll go to the hangout.
Yes, my question to you is, say that we're doing a 2-semester course, and your recommendation is to apply after you finish the first semester. And say you had a visa before, when it expired, and you're trying to get a next visa, and you apply after the first semester. You only have 1 semester. Are you looking at a 1-year visa and not like a 10-year visa because you only have 1 semester to the 1 year to the States?
What's your citizenship, sir?
Jamaica.
Jamaica. Okay. So the question, if I understood it, was if you're in a 1-year program, my recommendation is to wait till the 2nd semester, right? But if you're in your last semester and you're about to graduate, can that make it hard to get a visa? Is that?
No, not really hard. But if you do get a visa, are you looking at like a 10-year, 5-year, or just a 1-year?
Oh, okay. So is a visa, like if you're about to graduate, will it be limited?
Yeah.
Okay. No. We who do the interviews, we do have the authority to limit a visa if we want, but it is discouraged. Okay. So for example, for 10, I think Jamaicans get 10-year visas, right? So something has changed for Chinese citizens recently. Chinese citizens used to get 1-year visas, now it's 10-year visas. And just because you're graduating this semester doesn't mean that we're going to limit your visa to a single entry or one semester. I know it happens sometimes, but the Department of State, like our organization, actually discourages that. They encourage us to issue full validity visas. Okay? So if we do limit it, usually means there's some other sort of special reason, not just because you're graduating soon. Okay, one more question? Here?
Like 3 questions more.
I want to make sure we have a chance for the hangout because we have 15 more minutes. So maybe if we have time, we'll come back to the room here.
Hello. My question is that if
Sorry,
the
go
question
ahead.
is that if your legal partner is there in USA and that person is even on the student basis, and you are here
Mhm.
and a student basis. So if you want to go to USA for visiting and to see that person, ask you that to whom you are going to meet. And
Yeah.
obviously you will be truthful and would say that to this person.
Yeah.
And the next question logically would be like, how do you relate to that person? And then you answer them. So is there any chances where you get, like, is there any criteria where you can get the positive, negative points or something? Is it valid or invalid or something?
So your partner has an F1 visa?
That person is, like, this is general question, but he's on the student basis.
Student visa, right, in the U.S. Okay. So, so the question is, if you have a partner or a spouse in the U.S. on like a student visa, and this can apply to J1 visa too, right? But you're only going to visit. You're not going to live there, right?
No.
So in that case, you do want a B1, B2 visitor visa. You only should get a dependent F visa if you're going to live there and stay there. So just make sure you explain the situation in the interview. You should say that I don't plan on going to live there right now. That's why I'm applying for the visitor visa and not the F visa.
And what would be the duration of the visa? Like,
What's your citizenship?
Indian.
Sorry?
Indian.
So 10 years. Indians get 10-year visas. Okay? Okay, one more and then we'll go to Hangouts. Sorry. Yeah. Can you hold it closer to your things?
I had done an interview last week, and I have done my master's in history and I'm here for advanced diploma. So the officer asked me that after doing your master's, where you are here for advanced diploma, and he was not sure for that, and he gave me a letter on 221G. So my application is under review, so I just wanted to know what it is about.
Did you submit a CV or resume?
Yeah.
Okay. So your question is, how long does that take?
Yeah, and why it is under review? And what's wrong with it?
Oh, why is it under
What does it
review?
mean? Yeah, actually. I don't know.
Oh, okay. So I don't have your case in front of me, but most likely it undergoes a security review process. And usually for that process, it takes between 3 and 5 weeks. Sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. And that is for, as I said, people who have advanced degrees, master's degrees, postgrad diplomas, PhDs in the science, technology, engineering, or math fields, and who are citizens of certain countries. Okay?
So, I mean, should I accept like, or should I refuse it, or? Yes.
It's not technically it's a temporary refusal, but it's basically like putting your case on hold. Almost all of the people who go through that process get approved. Almost all. It's very rare to get actual refusal from that process.
So some people say that if it goes under review, then it gets only for 1 year. Right?
That's true. What's your citizenship?
Indian.
Indian, yeah. So Indians would normally get a 10-year visa. And unfortunately, with that process, the visa then becomes limited to 1 year.
So it's not irrelevant that after doing master you come here and then you cannot apply for a visa and everybody goes under the same thing?
I can't hear you, sorry.
After doing master, we come here for advanced diploma. So it's not irrelevant to apply for visa for US?
No. Please do apply. It's just, of course apply, but it just means that sometimes it will take longer and sometimes your visa will be limited. So after a year, you'll need to reapply, unfortunately, okay? Okay, so how do we do this?
So you can answer this one first. It's the first one.
All right, so the question is, do we need an invitation from friends and families in the USA to get the visa, or can we just provide their information? That's a great question. You can bring an invitation letter to the interview. I'd recommend it. I'd say probably 90% of the time, we won't ask to see it. So don't be mad, don't be alarmed if we don't ask to see it. It's because the purpose of the interview is for us to see you in person, in front of us, and ask you questions and see whether you can answer those questions credibly or not. Okay? Because anyone can make up an invitation. Anyone can create a fake invitation. A lot of people create fake invitations, right? So what we care about is, can you actually answer the questions that we ask. If you're going to visit your uncle, what's the last time you saw him? Right? Where does he live? What does he do? You know? Has he come to visit you in Canada? Things like that, okay? Okay, next. Hello, I'm an international student studying for 2 years. Maybe my brother is graduating in a university in Texas sometime in May, has been sending me an invitation to attend the graduate ceremony. What do I need to show off to guarantee a visa? And what determines length of the visa, okay? So he's going to visit for his brother's graduation ceremony. What should he bring? So yeah, like I said, an invitation letter can be helpful. If we ask you for it, you should have it, but we probably won't ask for it, is the answer, okay? Just be prepared to talk about your brother, what he's studying, what he's doing there, how long he's been there. When are you going? Are you staying with him or not? How long are you staying? When are you coming back? What are you going to do when you come back to Canada? Things like that, okay? Okay, applying for work in the US. How to answer this question? Do you now or in the future require sponsorship? I'm a Canadian citizen. What does sponsorship mean? I'm sorry for that person. I'd have to know more about what you're trying to ask. Like, where are you looking? What website? What visa category? Is this a TN visa? I'm not sure what you mean, sorry.
They can add that, or we can go on to the next one.
Okay. Maybe you think 1 or 2 more questions here?
Sure.
Okay, hi, I'm an international student from India, and I'm staying with my uncle and aunt. This is kind of fun for you guys, right? Staying with my uncle and aunt who are Canadian citizens. So what documents do I require to show when applying for a USA visa if I want to go as a tourist and visit New York or Buffalo and other places? Okay. Well, you know, it's good that you have family here. It's good. That does help your visa application if you have family here, especially if they're Canadian citizens. because it means that you don't just have a tie here as a student, you have a tie here as family, right? You have a place to stay, in other words. So that's great. Make sure in the interview, maybe I can do it like that. Make sure in the interview you mention that you're living with your aunt and uncle and that they're Canadian citizens, because that does help your case. And again, just be prepared to talk about why are you going to the US, what are you doing, where are you visiting, how long you're going to stay, things like that, okay?
I think this is a good one based on rejection. So after being rejected, how long should you wait to reapply?
After being rejected, how long should you wait to reapply? That was similar to the lady's question here. It looks like she's not here anymore, but I would recommend to wait to reapply if you've been refused until something in your life changes. In other words, until maybe you're just about to graduate, but you haven't started your job again. Or wait till you start your job. If you're applying for permanent residency, you're going to get that soon. You get permanent residency, wait till you get permanent residency. If you're in one semester, wait till you finish that semester when you're in your next semester. You can apply again and again and again, but if you've been refused once, 9 times out of 10 you'll be refused again the second time if nothing in your life has changed.
We can finish up.
Maybe if we have time for one more question in the audience here. It's almost 2 o'clock. Yeah, over there? I don't know where the microphone is. Oh, it's right there. So just speak loudly. So she had a 10-year visa. You got that back in Jamaica? Okay, and it's now expired. She's a student here. What are her chances of applying? If you've had a visa in the past, that helps your application. Because it means that, especially if you got your visa in your home country, because it means that someone in Kingston interviewed you and maybe your family and decided that you qualified for a visa in Jamaica. The refusal rate in Jamaica, I haven't been there, but it's higher than here in Canada. It's harder to get a visa in Jamaica. So if I were an officer interviewing you, I would think it would be very, very good that you had a visa from Jamaica. I'd probably want to know about how many times you've been to the US, how long you stayed each time, and what your situation in life is now. I want to hear more about how you're doing in school and your future plans and things like that, okay? That only helps your case. If you've had travel to the US before, it helps your case, okay? All right, so I think it is, I'm really sorry. If you guys have more questions, I will stay up here at the front. You can just come up and ask me, okay? But it's 2 o'clock, so I just want to kind of end the formal presentation. So thanks so much for coming. I appreciate it.
I want to say very for the great information you provided to us. We would like you to take this video. Thank you so much.
Okay, that's it. We have some handouts that will be... Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. We have some handouts at the front here. So if you would like to get some more information, you can ask Max your question up front and then also grab a handout. For everybody online, we also will have those handouts at our international offices. So if you want more information, you can pick up a handout at the international office on your campus. Okay, thanks for joining us on the handout. Take care.